Talked about on suspension today, we'll have the visa waiver program legislation by Candace Miller. This is a piece of legislation that was introduced actually in the last Congress, passed out of the committee months ago in March, unanimously. We took the task force that Will served on in Homeland, the recommendations, and a few key points that he brought up. There's 38 countries in this program out of 196 around the world. But the program allows an individual to travel to other countries, not by ever getting a visa or have communications or an interview, simply online. Well, if there's a visa lost or stolen, who's that person coming into your country? If you don't have an e-passport, biometrics like America does, do you really trace who that individual is? But the biggest fear that I have, and so many in this conference on both sides of the aisle, is that you have more than 5,000 individuals that have Western passports in this program that have gone to Iraq or Syria in the last 5 years. Those are gaps that we need to fix. When the Speaker asked us to put together the task force, counterterrorism and homeland security, we picked the committees that have jurisdiction. We'll meet again this week, but we are looking at short and long-term gaps that we need to fix in making sure that we're keeping the homeland safe. So we'll vote on that today. As well. We have a few outstanding items still to take up this week. For scheduling purposes, we told our members that there's a good chance they could be here through the weekend. They'll be here Friday for sure. We know we'll have to deal with a short-term CR. We will not allow the government not to be funded, so we'll do a short-term so we can finish our work. Because we also, when we finish the Omni, the extenders, we want to make sure there's a lot of transparency for the country to be able to see what's inside those bills before any vote takes place.
To defeat ISIS, it's going to take a strong strategy, and it's going to take strong leadership. Our intelligence community tells us that ISIS is not being contained. If you looked at President Obama's speech on Sunday night, all he talked about was the existing strategy that clearly is not working. And so while we know from our own intelligence community that ISIS not only is not being contained, but is actually coming into America, the American people need to see that clear strategy by the president. Rather than trying to take away the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens, President Obama needs to lay out a clear strategy that confronts this direct threat. The American people deserve to know that our government is doing everything in its power to keep them safe. And that's why the House is going to continue focusing on this direct threat by the legislation that we're moving forward coming out of our task force, working with our members who have the best expertise and who have been working on this for years. So today when you see us take on a bill to actually reform the visa waiver program, something that President Obama himself acknowledges has loopholes that need to be closed. That's an example of the House moving forward to do everything in our power to keep American families safe.
If you've ever visited the 9/11 Museum and Memorial, when you first walk into the museum, you see the pictures of 2,977 people who lost their lives that day. And when you emerge out of the museum, you have a lot of clarity as to those that would do us harm and the fight that we have against those who want to destroy our way of life and the values that we live every day as Americans. I was also reminded that we need leadership today more than ever. Our enemies are constantly adapting, and our focus must be clear. In the speech that the president gave earlier this week, it was really just more of the same, pointing fingers instead of taking principled action. What you're going to see again this week in the House is important action as we wait on the president's strategy to destroy ISIS. The reform to the visa waiver program is only just one of the tools that we believe we must be moving forward on to ensure that we're taking the steps so that America can be safe. More importantly, when a threat emerges, we have an obligation to target it and keep the fight against terrorism out of America. That is, after all, our fundamental obligation, protecting the safety and security of every American in this country.
The safety and security of Americans must be our top concern. It must be our foremost priority. That's why Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act, requiring the president to create a comprehensive strategy to defeat ISIS. Additionally, this important defense bill, which is now signed into law, stops the president's plan to transfer terrorists from Guantanamo Bay to possible locations such as the United States disciplinary barracks in Fort Leavenworth, which I proudly represent. I urge the president to listen to the American people, especially the folks in Leavenworth, and drop this reckless and expensive plan altogether. We should be focusing on stopping terrorists from entering the country. That is why the House is already working to protect American lives in a bipartisan fashion by updating and strengthening our visa waiver program. This is another step to ensuring the safety and security of Americans from those who seek to destroy us.
Questions?
Are you concerned at all that Donald Trump's plan could make Americans less safe, that it could possibly embolden terrorists?
I've already given my response on what I think about his comments.
Mr. Ryan, you were very forceful, though, right there, those comments. Do you think there could be lasting damage to the party from those types of comments?
I'm not concerned about lasting damage to the party. I'm concerned about standing up for our country's principles. These are first principles, and our party is dedicated to these first principles. And that's why I think it's incumbent upon leaders of our party like myself to stand up and defend what conservatism is and what the Republican Party stands for.
Mr. Speaker, I know that we're still working towards this omnibus bill here, and I know when we've asked you previously, so why don't you get in front of the appropriators, the appropriators, well, some of these decisions have to be made by the leadership. So now we're just a few days, obviously we're going to have to do a CR for a few days. Where are we? Can you live with refugees being in or out of this bill?
And so my answer will now evolve, and that means I am not going to negotiate through the media as to what it is we will or will not do. These negotiations are ongoing. We know that we're going to get it right instead of get it done fast. We are not going to waive the 3-day rule. We're going to make sure that members of Congress and therefore the public have the time to read what is agreed to, but we're not going to let the arbitrary December 11th deadline stop us from getting this right. We're going to get the best agreement we can possibly get, and those negotiations are ongoing. And I'm not going to negotiate through the media. Jonathan.
Are you looking at a 2-year extenders at this point?
We filed a 2-year extender last night at the Rules Committee. That is what we will do if we cannot get agreement on a long-term extender package, which obviously is our preference.
Without commenting on the state of omnibus negotiations, how long of a short-term continuing resolution do you need to?
That's something that the leaders and along with our folks over the other side of the Capitol will look at, but it will be a handful of days. We don't expect to do this for a long term. We need to get it right. I don't want us to go home until we get this done.
Last question.
Speaker Ryan, in your role as Speaker, you preside over the party's convention this summer. If Trump is the nominee, can you back?
I'm going to support whoever the Republican nominee is, and I'm going to stand up for what I believe in as I do that. Thank you.
All right, guys, now we're going to go live to Washington, D.C., where some